Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us back again for another resource session that I hope would shed a little more light, actually, a lot more light, thinking of Christina's wealth of experience around another topic that is very niched, but is very important when it comes to workplaces and inclusion. My name is Lola Adeyemo. If you are not familiar with the work I do, I work with organizations on building inclusive workplaces. My niche is employee resource groups, but that's really spreads out and builds out into the talent strategy. How should you have employee groups? Do you already have them? How can you best support and leverage these groups? So filtering out all of these through the lens of intersectionality. There's so much uniqueness around the groups that we have in the workplace. I also have a nonprofit called Immigrants in Corporate Inc. And also stemming from the work I do in the workplace, understanding that this population, immigrant professionals who are employed at work, have very unique needs. We have a membership platform for that. And today, part of the conversation I want to have, maybe we even touch around that with Christina, but Christina, do you want to introduce yourself first before we dive into the topic of global mobility?
Sure. Lola, thank you so much for having me. All of the conversations that we've had in preparation for this, you just really inspire me to keep going with what we're doing at Women of Global Mobility. I know we'll talk a little bit about that in the course of the session. But my name is Christina Urrutia. I have been in the global mobility space for just over 15 years now. I'm the current business development manager for Latin America, APAC, and the Americas South for Global Mobility Solutions. And I am the executive director of Women of Global Mobility, which is a nonprofit similar to yours, geared specifically to empowerment and resources for women in the global mobility space. Since I am in the space, I thought that this was something that I saw was so needed for inclusion in the mobility space and in those conversations in the workplace. So this topic is really near and dear to my heart and to my group as well. And the only other thing I can tell you is, you already know this, but I live in Puebla, Mexico.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, we did talk about that too. Is when you talk about immigrant women, immigrants, we kind of think about those that immigrated to the US. What about people that are immigrants in a different country
Yep.
and doing this work with a global focus? So thank you for being here, Christina. So
Pleasure.
let's dive into a little more about the topic we're here to discuss. And I think we need to break down the term first.
Yep.
So you want to help set the context for these. What exactly is global mobility?
Sure. So if someone isn't familiar with global mobility, right, it's such a niche market, and there's a lot of us who fell into this opportunity to work in or with our mobility people in our organization. But global mobility, by definition, is the movement of employees to accomplish a specific business goal. So that can include maybe talent development if you're on the talent acquisition team or the talent development team. It could talk about talent retention. You have an executive VP who he needs to develop something or advance in his career. How do you justify him advancing in his career? Business process improvement. Maybe you need a female VP to go and talk about inclusion in the workplace in some of your plants that are around the world. Or maybe you're doing global expansion. It's the first time you've expanded into a new area, and you need to send some people there to make sure that your culture, your company culture, which is so important to develop, make sure that those things get transferred to the right place. And then, of course, it affects staffing and any other things that the business unit needs. Now, this could go from moving employees to the jobs, or even moving certain positions around in your organization to where the people are. And that's something that is all under the scope of global mobility.
Right. So moving employees around, moving their families, or just the
Yeah,
consideration is
so
just focused on the employees?
ideally, in a perfect world, global mobility should absolutely take into consideration the family aspect of it, right? Because Yes, you will have senior executives who are single men or single women who have just developed their careers and they don't have a family to take along. But even if their marital status is single, it doesn't mean that they are relocating alone. We really
Right.
should be taking into consideration the full family, right?
Right.
I have my father, he's 70 years old. If I were going to go on a global assignment, I might want, with my dad being older, I might want to take my dad with me on that assignment as well. I have a husband, I have a son, but it might be necessary to take my dad. To, elder care is a real problem in the workforce. Women are taking care of their elderly parents. They have lots of responsibilities out of the family responsibilities. So it's important to be thinking about that.
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about global mobility, it touches on different departments.
It does.
And can you clarify where does global mobility sit in an
That's
organization?
such a great question, because the answer is it depends. It depends on the organization. Global mobility really is what we talked about. It's at the crossroads of talent, because you're developing talent. You're bringing in new talent. Maybe you're bringing in engineers from Colombia into the United States, or maybe you have some talent that you need in Germany that the only people that have that specific skill set is in China. You need to move these people around because of the talent need. HR is involved because it's a human resources problem, right? Like, where are these people coming from? What are the taxabilities? When we talk taxability, right, we're talking compensation, benefits. What are the tax liabilities and things that the business unit needs to think about? And then, of course, business unit and procurement. We want to do cost savings, right? Or maybe the business unit doesn't want to spend a lot of money on external talent because it costs money to move these people.
Right.
So there's really no right answer where it sits. But all of these players need to be involved in these conversations around talent, and especially
Right.
global mobility.
Right. So in most organizations, is this a role or a department that is created, or is this a responsibility that is handed to somebody in one of these departments?
That's a great question. Also, it can depend, right? I have seen some organizations that have a special unit, a division, a global mobility team, right? A structured team that, there's a VP of global mobility, or sometimes it sits in total rewards. But it could be a defined function depending on your program size. How many people are you moving per year?
Right.
Are you moving just one or two people? Maybe you do that in-house, right? Maybe you have Lola is in HR and she's going to take over these responsibilities. But as that grows, or if you have a more developed program in your company or your organization, there might be a full team. And that team is then supported by a company like GMS that does outsourcing and helps you to manage that population and keep taxes straight, all of that. No one can do it by themselves. Even when it's an internal program, you're still reaching out to partners to figure out the whole puzzle.
To figure out, yeah. And I think it's, I can imagine it also depends on the size of your organization, the industry, and all of that. So thank you for sharing that. I think, also thinking about the people that are listening, the context of this conversation is a way to empower, encourage, give strategies to people that are working inside organizations and wanting to know some of the ways that they can help. Is it with the conversations? Is it with resources? So what are some of the key challenges that we have with global mobility that, people need to be aware of as we think of solutions?
So I'm going to take it in the direction of my Women of Global Mobility group, because we have a lot of conversations that we build around this. One of the things that I've seen personally is, like, the number one challenge is diversity in candidate selection. Because when people are being put up for a promotion or something that considers possibly a global move, right, from the US to the UK or the UK to Mexico, wherever, sometimes our biases get in the way when we look at what are the candidates. Oh, she probably wouldn't want to go on an assignment. She has a family. She has a little baby, right? And, you and I talked about this specifically about women in the workplace. It's very hard for us to hide the fact that we have a family. Men, you could walk into a workplace, and this is nothing against men, nothing at all, but a man could walk into the workplace and you would never know over the course of 5 years, unless he told you, you would never know if he had a family, kids, wife, nothing. But for women, it's a very physical change that we experience when we have a family, right? A lot of us, when we get pregnant, if we're going to the workplace, you can't hide it forever. So HR is aware, right? You take maternity leave, and those little check boxes in your talent acquisition software, they're not supposed to mean anything. They're not supposed to be considered when you're put up for a position. However, they absolutely are. And anyone who tells me that it's not considered, I would call them out on that. I wouldn't tell them they were lying. I would just call them out and say, are you sure? Because we all have our own personal biases. Even I would say, that person probably wouldn't, they have 4 kids. They probably would not want to go on an assignment.
Yeah.
That's not.
I know, you say it's not considered. We're not supposed to ask, but that's the thing. You go for an interview and you tell them you have 4 kids or you have 5 kids, and you're like, oh, it's not on my resume, but they know now. They heard that. That's going to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Sure. And all it takes is one time, like when you're talking to your manager, for example, even if women were to like guard ourselves, let's say you're done with your child having years, right? But you have young children at home. Even if you went through the interview process, didn't mention your children, even if we got to the point where you were going to the office every day, eventually one of those kids are going to get sick. You're going to have to take a PTO day. And now your manager knows that you have a child at home. And it's just something in their head. It's just another thing, or a general conversation, right? And I'm not saying that we should lock our feelings away, lock our family away in a basement somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's just so natural for women to talk about our children and our families and the things going on outside of work. That's who we are as women.
Right.
And it really does. Unfortunately, it's all taken into consideration when we look at that candidate pool. So always, my advice to talent people who are dealing with this would absolutely be check your biases at the door. When you're looking at 2 candidates, cover up their names if you have to, before you read through the whole thing first. And then write down if you think you have a bias, right? Like if you're saying, this person isn't qualified because, if any of that has to do with something that's a personal bias that you think maybe, check yourself again and go back through it.
Yeah. And I think also understanding that some of this is not because of evil intent, right?
No, it's
People
not.
think they are being considerate, like, oh, you know, this person has a family, so they wouldn't want that move. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Is there anything else when you think of, so apart from diversity in talent selection, any other thing that are key challenges in the workplace when it comes to global mobility?
I would say something we already touched on, the changing needs of the employee and the family. And it doesn't matter if you're moving a male, a female, anybody in your organization, younger, older, whatever level. I think that everyone, since COVID especially, we've all changed a little bit, right? And it's silly, 4 years out, we're still talking about this time of change that happened in COVID. But it really did set our priorities straight. What do we value in life? And the changing needs of that, right? A lot of us who had kids at the very beginning of the pandemic, our kids are now going to preschool. My needs have changed as an employee. Even if my job has not changed, my needs have changed in the last 2 years, right? The difference between having a young child who's not in school, where I'm, navigating nannies, versus now he's in school, he's moving around, he's doing his own things. My needs have changed. From a male's perspective, I'm sure that things change too, right? Your wife or your family at home, you may have a higher level position that requires you to do more things. Maybe in the last couple of years, the market's been pretty good. You sold your home and bought a new one. If you are approached at this time to move after you just bought a home, guess what? Your needs have changed, because now selling that home right now, it's not a fun process, right? Or if you there's just so many things that change every single year And my recommendation here would be always checking in on those employee needs, right? Making sure you're benchmarking against other companies, because if you're in a certain industry where things have changed a lot, maybe the work from home situation, people are more keen to work from home or work from anywhere. This is something that I see all the time now. People want to work from anywhere. And the responsibilities of the organization to cover that can be, you have certain duties of care if you allow it. So if you say you can work from anywhere, you have a duty of care to keep your employees safe, paid at the correct wage, and provide for them their basic needs in that relocation, which, if you're saying that, it includes visa, you're talking immigration. Every family is different for what they need, and that changes, and you need to change with it.
Right, right. And I always say, if you can't support your employees through a season, I mean, then what's the purpose of having employees? People, whether they are women, men, parents, there's going to be changing needs. I really like the way you put it, right? Checking with people.
I love what you just said about seasons, because, as women and men go, right, everyone, right? We all go through these things, and they happen seemingly out of nowhere. Divorce happens, houses burn down, there's disasters in the world, there's challenges, immigration that changes on a dime. And all of us deserve that same support, and equalized support, not equal, equitable support. I always like to make that difference, right? Because equal support means here's the policy, this is what you get. Equity is much different than equality. And I think it's so important to have that built into your programs. And how do you do that? It's from that checking yourself, again, always checking back in, asking your employees, what is it that you need? What would it take if you were given this assignment? What would I need to do as your employer to make this a successful assignment?
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure if it was with you or with somebody else, I was talking about the fact that even when these assignments, that part of why, women and promotion and pay is because when you are presented an assignment, women, we are looking at the full picture before you even say yes. You're asking all these questions. And most men will say yes because it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And then you tell your spouse.
Yes, you'll tell the spouse what's going to happen. And, the big problem with that is that from my perspective, right? I used to be a relocation coach. I have coaches on my team at GMS where they're getting stuck with those conversations, those tough, horrible conversations that you have to explain to the wife. Hey, you're going to have to move your kids halfway across the world. We're going to help you find a school that hopefully they speak English at the school, or whatever language you're going to, right? English usually they have international schools that speak English. But again, the woman is left to figure out all of the logistics piece of it, right? The man is happy at work.
Right. And the person that got moved is the man.
Yes. And the only thing the man has to worry about is, what day do I start at my new job, versus all of this. Now flip the roles. It doesn't change when the woman is the VP getting moved. I know this because I've dealt with it. When the woman is the VP, I'm not calling the husband and saying, hey, you're the trailing spouse. Are you orchestrating this? Because the answer is no. The woman is still a VP at her office, being transferred, finishing the school with the kids here, bring them to the new school, vetting schools, vetting nannies, vetting all of this. And she's a VP. Guess what? That is not equity. That's not equitable services. We're not supporting them. Women just have different needs, whether it's in assignments, at workplace, even if they're not moving anywhere. Women have different needs in the workplace, and we need to be meeting them.
Yeah, thank you so much. That very good. I think just setting the context around global mobility and all of the decisions, all of the actions that are taken, all of the decisions that need to be made, it's really helpful, even for me. I know we had a few calls after we connected, and I have learned so much on this topic, even by having conversations with you. So thank you for the work you do. Is there anything else that you want people to really know and understand about global mobility? We talked about a few challenges, we explained it, and this is a very short conversation, and my goal is that people will walk away with a better understanding of what it is, more awareness, and the, that urge to do more within their organization. So anything else you like people to know and walk away with?
I think the very first thing that people need to understand, if you've never dealt with employee global mobility, if you're new to the field, if you're an HR person that's moving somebody or considering moving somebody, the number one thing you need to know is that employee assignment failure, which means just that the employee goes on an assignment and doesn't complete the business unit need. That can cost the company upwards of $450,000 per employee per failed assignment. Because what happens is not only are you covering this person's their salary, but the employee is supposed to be accomplishing a strict strategic business goal. You're spending money to move their household goods, you're spending money to help move their family, and you're doing all of this stuff so that you can accommodate them in a place where you need a specific goal met. If it fails, it's going to cost you big because you have to still find somebody else. We're talking about going back to the talent field, nominating somebody else, figuring out how to move them now. But also, once you've moved somebody, you are at a duty of care responsibility to move them back. So if the assignment fails, whether it's your fault, their fault, anybody's fault, you still have to move them back and put them back where you found them because that is the right thing to do. It's your duty of care. So that's the first thing, $450,000 per failed assignment. I'm going to give you a fun fact that we haven't talked about. The number one reason for a failed assignment, unhappy spouse or children who could not adapt to the new location. And I've seen it time and time again. The spouse says, okay, fine, we'll do this because this is your career. I'm happily going along. But the spouse doesn't feel supported, wasn't given the proper benefits to accommodate their life and for all that they are sacrificing. These families are picking up their life, leaving schools, leaving friends, leaving elderly parents behind, and they're being moved across the world to do your work. And yes, you've compensated the person who's on assignment. You've given them more money. You've given them temporary living. Have you really thought about the disruption that is going beyond that? How often are you allowing the family to travel back? Do they have the funds? Because even if you're paying your employee what they're worth in that location, do they have the resources to travel back for family holidays? You only get so many of those. As your parents get older, how many do you have left? You're missing key family things that are going on. Are you disrupting the schooling of your children, of the family? Because those children who are high school age, you are disrupting their education, sending them to a foreign country, which could help or hurt, depending on what you're giving them as resources. Because if they want to go to a college in a certain district, or they're going on track for engineering or something like that, you have to be cognizant of the full family that's going with you.
Yeah.
So those two things are the most important.
Yeah, I mean, and I thank you for speaking the language that leaders understand, because the money, I wanted to read something that Nan put on there because I think it kind of sums up what you just said. Nan Park said global mobility is a key framework to improve a company's competitive advantage, innovation, and transformation. It's an investment, not an expense.
It is.
Right?
That was on my cheat list, right? I told you, immigration and relocation services, global mobility has historically been seen as a cost center. They see it as a cost center because there's so much money that you're putting out, and the return is not measurable because you cannot measure the value of a person in dollars, right? It's what they bring to the company, what it brings to the culture, what it does for the community. You can't measure those things in numbers. It's something that you have to trust the business leaders to do.
Right. And because you have to put that money all out up front, you kind of get stuck focusing on how much we're spending to move this person. This is a lot of money, right? But it's way more than that when you think about the impact on the family and the cost of it failing, right?
And the other important thing too is remember that when you do this assignment, you have to have an end in mind, right? It's great to move from A to B, but you should always have point C, which ideally would be the return of your expat, whoever you're sending on assignment, should be returned back in better condition than what you took them from. So whether that is transitioning them permanently to a new country where they're happy, healthy, and ready to contribute to that team, or if it means repatriation to your organization, to the home office. And when that repatriation happens, having a succession plan. What is next? Because employees who have been on assignment are I think it's like 3 or 4 times more likely to leave the organization after an assignment if they are not adequately reintegrated into the home office. 3 to 4 times more likely. So again, that would constitute a failed assignment still, because now you've spent all that money taking 2, bringing back, and they still left the company.
And and then you start incurring the costs of replacing them. Right.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. This has been helpful. I hope this has been helpful to those listening. If you have any question for Christina, we could probably take 1 or 2 questions. But again, the focus on just enlightening people about this very niche topic. I hope we'll have a sequel with more actionable. Yeah, because again, part of why I love this, because these are topics that we don't talk about, that are impacting every workplace. And as the organization becomes more global now, people are hiring all over. There's still that need to move people when companies especially open up sites or have different projects in different countries. If the company is based in one country, they still need to take that talent and the skill, move them to a different location. So what should you be thinking about if you're an ERG leader, if you're a DEI leader listening? This is a space where we need voices. We need advocacy voices within the organization to ask these questions. What does it look like? If you are not aware of global mobility at the organization, this is a good question to ask somebody. How do we handle it? How do we select the people that we put on assignment? I mean, usually this is a lot of high profile roles, but I'm assuming, is there a lot of these happening?
I have seen low managers. We move interns. Like, it's so important to think developing talent from a strategy perspective. You need to ask, where are we getting our interns? Is this the only place we can get our interns? If it's only down the street at the local college, especially for anyone in the Midwest, right, where there's not a lot of talent pool or a lot of opportunities in your particular city, are you opening that to a remote role? Maybe are you looking for talent in other places, other countries even, and then partnering with the right people to help make that a reality in your organization? Immigration attorneys like USI Law, for example, or any of the partners like GMS or PTS for moving. Any of those services can help you to get those people where you're moving to and from. So it's really important to have the right partner network.
Have the right network. And somebody also put a comment around, this is similar to the diverse talents, the challenges diverse talents face when you move them to take roles with companies based in geographic regions that are non-diverse, right? Yes. So it's thinking bigger and broader when it comes to moving people. Yep. Where are we taking them to, and what does the support look like?
There's lots of roles that, depending on where your headquarters are, right? Like, you have a lot of challenges with that, because there are also particular specifications that you are not allowed to bring in talent unless you've already like exploited the talent pool that's there. You have to have like extraordinary talent. For example, in the US, we have things that you just have to follow the first rule. But then when you are allowed and able to open it up to a more diverse talent pool, what happens next, right? So there's lots of regions that are like that the rules prohibit it. You can't look for outside talent.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Christina. And I hope, everyone walks away with 1 or 2 things. And if you have any question, please drop it in the chat. Follow up with Christina or myself. I host executive roundtables with 8 to 10 leaders, a couple of these every month. And these are part of the conversations we talk about. This is part of what feeds into these live sessions, is what are these topics that we have questions. I bring HR, talent, L&D leaders together in small groups across different companies and industries, and we talk about hot topics and experiences that people are having in their organizations. If you love to join us, please send me a message. I'll be happy to add you to the next roundtable. And I appreciate you joining us live. If you're watching this on replay, definitely follow up with questions and would watch the chat so we can provide answers. Thank you, Christina, for
Thank
joining me
you.
today and making me a little more, what is the word when you have more knowledge? A little more
Knowledgeable.
literate, literate
Absolutely. I love
around
that word.
global mobility and just the huge opportunity we have there to build more inclusive practices. And I'm looking forward to following up with you about this topic as well.
Definitely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Lola, for hosting, and for everyone who's watching. Again, if you want to connect with me, feel free. Happy to answer any questions individually. And I appreciate the time, Lola. This is great.
Yes, and Women of Global Mobility specifically, do you want to share a little bit about what Women of Global Mobility does and how people can get involved?
Sure, sure. So if you are in the if you're in the mobility space, anything that touches mobility, including comp and bends, or you just want to get more familiar with global mobility, Women of Global Mobility it's a nonprofit that is designed to support and empower women in the workplace, specifically in global mobility roles. We talk about everything from our outside perspective. We don't talk about mobility specifically. We talk about all of the other roles that we're handling while still coming to work and showing up, and how do we be the best versions of ourselves. So allyship in the workplace. How can we as women support other women when we're in the workplace? It doesn't always happen, right? We've talked about that. And then how can men support us as well? So men are also welcome to join our group. It's free to join. It's not really anything that excludes you from membership. If you'd like to join us, just reach out and I'll give you more information and you can decide.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you for
Thank you.
shedding more light on that as well. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. It's been great having this conversation and looking forward to the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.